Group of Caribbean women, they came, they started working here. 89 straight days without a day off. They worked 14 hours a day.
89?
89 days.
We're learning even more about what is really happening on farms across Canada. More and more Canadians are demanding answers after learning about the revelations about the mistreatment of migrant farm workers across the country. Some of those revelations were detailed in this letter penned by Jamaican migrant workers who were begging for help from the government. It is a letter we previously reported on and one that we're going to continue to discuss. I'm Brandon Gonez, and before we go any further, I need you to do a few things, like subscribing to this channel, tap that notification bell, make sure to smash the like button, and don't forget to follow us across all of our social media. The details are in the description below. Today, we are going to be talking to an organization who's been following and documenting this story from top to bottom, and also will advise how you, as Canadians, can advocate for change. So Hassan, what is happening on farms across Canada right now?
I mean, we call it a human rights catastrophe. What we're seeing is that people are being abused, getting injured, living with pesticides, rats are eating their food, they're being mistreated by their bosses, working particularly right now, 7 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day, because that is the immigration system we have. Workers are being exploited because the employers can just get away with it.
This is a story that for a lot of people who are closely connected to it isn't new.
It's not new. The coverage that you've been doing and what's being in the letter, that's kind of like middle of the road. Like some situations are so much worse. Like let me give you an example. In Nova Scotia, group of Caribbean women, they came, they started working here. 89 straight days without a day off. They worked 14 hours a day.
89?
89 days. And then they got sick. And they had a heat stroke, so they fell, so they went to they called an ambulance, they went to the hospital. When they came back, their bags were packed and they were driven to the airport. They were on a connecting flight in Toronto, and they walked out of the airport and they came to us. These are the conditions, One day the employer came home and came to their houses, the bunkhouse, and started flipping tables and breaking their stuff, saying they hadn't been working fast enough.
This is the treatment that migrant farm workers are going through.
Yeah, and it's effectively legal, it's effectively sanctioned.
They're allowed to do this?
I mean, they're allowed to do this because they know workers don't have the power to stand up.
What do you mean by not having the power to stand up?
Okay, I mean, think about it this way. When you have a problem at work, right, if your boss is paying you low wages, they're not allowed to, really. What you can do is you can leave the job, or you can stand up and fight, you can take them to court, right? So it's a system based on complaints. Your landlord can jack up your rent, but you can go to the tribunal and fight them. It's about power. For farm workers, their boss's name is written on their permit. They're not allowed to work for anyone else, right? So they live in employer-controlled homes. So now, you speak up, suddenly you're kicked out on the streets, you're homeless, you can't work anywhere else, you're starving. Not just that, as I said, bosses have all these tricks to get you out of the country, and they can ban you from coming back. And of course, labor rights are excluded. So things like making you work 89 days, that's legal. You can actually, because you don't have to give them a day off. Overtime pay, excluded. Minimum wage, excluded. Breaks during work sessions, excluded. There are people working on these farms, I don't know, think about strawberries, right? We all love strawberries. You have to be on your hands and knees without shade the entire day. And you can't even get up to go to the bathroom. There may not even be a bathroom on the field, and the breaks aren't, so you can't just do that. The letter was written because the Minister of Labor was going to come from Jamaica to these farms.
So it was Jamaican farm workers who wrote this letter?
Jamaican farm workers at Triguno and Kaiweens wrote this letter because they knew the minister was coming and he wouldn't see the truth of it, right? But you know what, this hasn't been revealed yet, but we have footage from that visit. And in it, he says to the workers, you have to serve the bosses. By working here, you're serving your country, you're serving your family, but you have to serve the bosses, right? The message that they gave to them is just shut up and keep working. And why not? I mean, Jamaica's effectively, and like countries like Philippines and Indonesia, the entire GDP is now being based on exporting people who can then send remittances back home. So there's this kind of alliance between the employers, the government of Canada, the government of sending countries to keep people just quietly working because everyone's making money off of it.
That letter that was written by the migrant workers, the Jamaican migrant workers,
From 2 farms, yeah.
From 2 farms. One of those farms was highlighted in a national grocery store's flyer. What was your take on that?
You know, this week, of all weeks, when every news channel probably at this point in this country are talking about this letter, talking about this farm, and Sobeys own Foodland has put, you know, the Kaiween's family farm, and I'm reading it, and you can read it, and I know you showed it on your show, like it says these are hand-picked peaches by this father and son and grandfather duo. Those hands have never touched those peaches. You know, it is the hands of black men. It is the hand of Mexicans and Filipinos who work there, who have been picking that food and sending it to us. So the absolute denial of who feeds us, you know, the truth is everywhere it says buy local, eat local produce, support farmers, and you have these happy white faces. I'm sorry, those people aren't really growing most of your food anymore. Some are, that's true, many are not. It's been 2 weeks, nothing, since this letter's out, nothing's happened. It's been 2 weeks since people have died, but this year already so many other people have died. Like, at what point will there be action? So I found it egregious, I found it disgusting. I think like, you could walk into a Foodland right now and it's still there.
So who can change things? Who's responsible for the conditions that migrant farm workers, whichever country they come from, are dealing with?
Look, at the end of the day, migrants are the ones who can protect themselves. Right? That's the central thing. Just as I said earlier, you and I, we protect ourselves. So we need to have the power to protect ourselves, which means permanent immigration status. We're calling on Prime Minister Trudeau, the workers are calling on Prime Minister Trudeau to, when Parliament returns on September 19, to put into effect a program that all migrants in the country, workers, but also students, refugees, get full and permanent immigration status so that individuals can be with their families. Permanent resident status is the mechanism through which you access all other rights. You want healthcare, you gotta have citizenship. You want education, you gotta have citizenship. So people are coming here. There's 1.7 million, that's 1 in 23 people in the country who are migrants in Canada today, right? Wow. Students, workers, and then of which 500,000 are undocumented, no papers at all. Farm workers are the kind of model program, right? The seasonal agricultural worker program was created.
Well, this one has been in place for quite some time.
1966.
And there's been a lot of criticism about this program.
It is massive. I mean, we've written multiple reports, done
legal cases. What are some of the biggest
cases.
criticisms about the seasonal agricultural worker program?
You know, there are no housing standards in Canada for farm worker housing.
So there are no housing standards?
There's no national housing standards. There are some municipal laws and there's no way to enforce them. It comes like, even if there were rules, right? This is what I'm saying, you couldn't enforce it, but there are no rules. Similarly, access to, you know, worker safety. So if they're injured, they're in Ontario, there's never been a coroner's inquest into a farm worker death. And for Spanish-speaking workers, when they show up, they don't speak the language, so the employers will go with them and get all their personal and private health information.
Do we have an estimation of how many workers have come through the seasonal agricultural workers program?
Yeah, so the average is between 60 and 75,000 people a year. You know, Mr. Yap, who just passed away, he'd been coming to the country for 35 years. You know, how's that seasonal? How's that temporary? And then you go back home to your family who barely recognize you, right? You're the guy who's been sending money for all these years, or the mom who's been sending packages. And now you're maybe sick, now you start having cancer after doing this all these years, and people are passing away without even the EI or the CPP contributions they made. Because they live here all these years, they're paying into the system, right? They pay income taxes, they pay taxes on everything you buy, you pay HST, they pay, and then suddenly they're gone.
What do wages look like for these workers?
On average, people are making, irrespective of the number of hours they're working, around $2,000, $2,200 a month, right? And so if you think about like 14, 16-hour days working, you know, and that's in Ontario. I mean, in Nova Scotia, it's much lower, right? In New Brunswick, it's much lower. And then there's deductions from their paycheck. So you'll see in the letter, the government of Jamaica deducts an amount to provide support services. The employers deduct an amount to put them in these rat-infested holes.
So with all the different stakeholders at play, you have the government of Canada, you have the foreign governments, you have these privately owned farms. What does a solution look like? Or is there even a potential for a solution?
You know, I want to add a very big stakeholder, right? So think about it this way. Canada is the world's 5th largest exporter of agri-food, right? The amount of money that is made in agri-food in Canada is greater than the GDP of Jamaica.
Wow.
Okay? They have this pressure on them from the people who buy food from them and then the supermarkets. Who's the richest person in this country? He's the guy who owns a supermarket, like the owner of Loblaws. Right? This is a country controlled. There are only 5 supermarket chains in the country. All of them are owned between these 5 corporations. And so they have an enormous interest in keeping workers exploitable, keeping them in these dangerous conditions. Not just farm workers, but also the truck drivers who are migrants, also the restaurant workers who are migrants. But the solution is simple. Prime Minister Trudeau has to give full and permanent immigration status to all migrants right now. He knows
that gives them leverage.
That gives them leverage. That lets them walk away from a bad job. That lets them get into a union. That lets them say, you can't treat me like this. That lets them have their families visit them. That lets them have a day off. I mean, these are human beings, you know. We fall in love. Maybe we have a bad mental health day. We are not machines.
12 people have already died this year alone on Canadian farms that your organization is aware of.
We know of a dozen people who have died, and but we are now hearing more reports, so we're actually trying to figure out what the exact numbers are.
Does the government keep track of these numbers?
No. We try to keep track when our members tell us. But here's the thing, what about all the people who die when they're not here? Who fall sick, inhale pesticides, get injured, and the employers ship them home before they're done?
For anybody watching, any Canadian watching, who feels passionate about this, or who's starting to feel passionate about this, what can the average Canadian do to help if they want to?
The first thing I want you to do is to go to statusforall.ca and sign our petition. We're sending a message to Prime Minister Trudeau. That's the first thing. And then you can and then we'll send you messages about more actions. On September 18th, across the country, we're holding protests. On September 1st, we're doing a call-in day to call. So we're right now very loudly organizing for full and permanent immigration status for farm workers, but also all migrants. Next time you take a bite of a peach, a tomato, a cucumber, asparagus, you smell a flower, you drink a glass of wine, think about all of the migrants who touched that, who made it possible for you to have that. And then ask yourself, am I okay with people living in systematic slavery?
Thank you so much for sharing all that information with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey BG Squad, thanks so much for checking out our channel, and listen to this, we have more great content for you, like this video right here and this video right here. By the way, don't forget to subscribe to this channel right now and tap that notification bell.